The fluorescent lights hummed their mechanical song above the surgical table. 2:47 in the morning. The private clinic behind the steel door that nobody on Boston streets knew existed. Mia Morales stood rigid in the white vinyl chair, her left arm extended like an offering, like a blade she was handing over to a god. The nurse, a woman with kind eyes and a practiced hand, had already swabbed her skin with iodine, the sharp chemical bite flooding her nostrils. The tourniquet around her bicep pulled tight, cutting off the world below her elbow. "You're a rare match," the nurse said, her voice low and steady. "O negative with the specific markers. Without this transfusion in the next hour, he dies." On the surgical table lay a man Mia had seen for less than 30 seconds before they brought her here. His shirt lay torn and discarded on the floor like a piece of meat. Bandages wrapped around his abdomen, soaked through with blood so dark it looked black under the fluorescent glare. His skin had the color of old paper, the color of things that had been dead for a very long time. The heart monitor beside him beeped its uneven rhythm. Boop. 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 Long pause. Boop. Tony stood by the door, his hand resting on the grip of the pistol at his hip. He did not move. He did not blink. His suit, charcoal gray, wool so fine it caught the light like water, cost more than Mia made in 3 months. He had driven the black SUV that pulled her from the storm. He had carried her limp body inside. He had said nothing except, "The boss will want her blood type immediately." Dario stood on the other side of the table, watching the heart monitor like he was personally responsible for keeping that failing heart beating. He was older than Tony, his hair threaded with silver, his face carved from someone's memory of what power should look like. A scar ran from the corner of his left eye down to his jawline, thin and white and terrible. The needle entered Mia's vein without pain. Just pressure. Just the sensation of something being taken from inside her body. The plastic tubing ran from her arm to a collection bag, clear tubing that immediately flushed crimson. Her blood. Dark red flowing into white plastic. Flowing away from her. The nurse connected the bag to a secondary line. The second needle went into the man's arm, the man on the table, the man with the grey skin and the shallow breathing and the bandages that looked like he had been torn open by something with claws. His blood went dark red. Her blood became his blood. "Stay still," the nurse said. "It takes about 10 minutes." Mia did not nod. She did not speak. She had learned long ago that invisibility was safety. Keep your head down. Keep your mouth closed. Become background. Become the air that people breathed without noticing. But the man on the table opened his eyes. Just for a second. Just for one breath. His eyelids lifted and she saw them, dark eyes, storm gray at the edges, ancient and predatory and absolutely aware. They locked onto hers across the distance of that surgical room. They saw her. Not through her. Not past her. Saw her. Then his eyes closed again. The heart monitor's rhythm changed. The long pause shortened. Boop boop. Boop boop. Boop boop. Steady now. Almost human again. Dario exhaled. It was the first sound he had made since she arrived. "How long?" Tony asked the nurse. 6 more minutes, she said. "The markers are incorporating." His colors coming back already. It was true. The gray was fading from the man's face. The skin beneath the bandages shifted from the color of ash to something approaching living flesh. The breathing deepened. The shallow chest rose and fell in a rhythm that suggested he might actually survive this night. Mia's arm throbbed where the needle Saturday. She could feel her own heartbeat in her bicep, feel the rhythm of her life leaving her body and entering his. She had never given blood before. She had never done anything but take the wages that came short, take the verbal abuse from Mrs. Chen at the care home, take the beatings from Douglas Hale when he found her outside the grocery store and decided she needed to remember that she belonged to him. She had never given anything to anybody. The plastic bag emptied. The tubing pulsed with the final drops of her blood. "That's it," the nurse said. She withdrew the needle with the same gentle efficiency. "A cotton ball. Tape. Keep this on for 5 minutes. Don't move your arm." Mia did not move. She sat perfectly still in the vinyl chair while the man on the surgical table continued breathing, continued existing, continued living because her blood had chosen to save him. The nurse checked the monitors one more time. "He'll sleep through the night. The transfusion took. His vitals are stable." She looked at Tony. "You can call your people. Tell them he's going to make it." Tony nodded once. He pulled a phone from inside his jacket. A phone that probably cost more than Mia's car. He typed one message and then the phone disappeared. No word spoken. No emotion crossing his face. Dario came closer. He looked down at the man on the table, looked at him the way a general looks at a soldier who just survived an impossible battle. "He's going to want to know her name," Dario said. "Mia," the nurse offered. "Mia Morales." She was on Route 128 when the call came in. The cars found her car broken down in the storm. "Does she know who he is?" Dario asked. The nurse glanced at Mia. Something flickered in her eyes. Pity, maybe. Or warning. "I don't think so." Dario nodded slowly. He pulled a chair over and sat down beside Mia. This close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive, something that cost more than she had in her bank account. He was careful not to touch her. He just sat there, his scarred face tilted slightly, studying her the way someone studies a painting they cannot quite understand. "You have a name?" he asked. Mia's mouth was very dry. "Mia. My name is Mia Morales." "Well, Mia Morales," Dario said, "you just saved the life of Alindro Valenti. Do you know what that name means?" She shook her head. Even that small movement felt dangerous. "It means you now belong to him," Dario said. "Not as a slave. Not as a possession. But as something tied to his life. Something precious. Something that cannot be forgotten or dismissed or returned." He stood up. "In the morning, he will wake and he will ask for you. You will come to him. You will not leave this building. You will not contact anyone. You will wait for his instructions. Do you understand?" Mia understood perfectly. She had lived with Douglas Hale long enough to recognize the voice of someone who would not accept disobedience. She nodded. "Good," Dario said. "Welcome to the family, Mia Morales." He walked out of the surgical room. Tony followed. The nurse made notations on a chart and disappeared through a different door, leaving Mia alone with the unconscious man whose blood now mixed with hers, whose eyes had seen her for one impossible second, whose name she had never heard before this night. The heart monitor beeped its steady rhythm. Boop boop. Boop boop. Boop boop. Outside, somewhere beyond the windows Mia could not see, Boston slept in the October cold. Her 1997 Honda sat abandoned on Route 128, the engine dead, the heat broken, the car as useless as everything else she owned. Emma was in the children's hospital, sleeping in a bed that probably cost more than Mia made in a year. Emma's leukemia did not care that Mia had no money. Emma's leukemia did not care about anything except the fact that she had 7 days left and no way to save her. But Mia Morales had just donated her blood to a dying stranger in a private clinic at 2:47 in the morning. And she had no idea that the man on that surgical table owned half of Boston's underworld, that every favor owed to him came with a price written in violence, that her grandmother's recipe book was the only thing she owned that could matter to him, or that her decision to save his life would either destroy her or save everything she loved. 7 hours earlier, October 13th, 5:17 p.m. Mia counted the crumpled bills on the steering wheel of her 1997 Honda Civic. The engine ticked as it cooled. The heat didn't work. $78. That was all she had left in the world. She turned each bill over carefully, as if by handling them differently some invisible amount might multiply. It did not. $78 remained $78. The math would not change no matter how many times she performed it. 7 days. $125,000. Emma's 8th birthday was in November. If the treatment didn't happen before then, her niece would spend her birthday in a hospice bed instead of blowing out candles. Mia's phone lit up on the passenger seat. A text from her sister Rosa. Doctors say we're down to a week. Please. You said you'd figure something out. She deleted it. Deleting the message would not delete the truth inside it. The staff bathroom at Shady Pines Care Home was where Mia had counted her money 3 times that day. $78. $78. $78. The repetition was supposed to make it feel less impossible. It did not. She had worked double shifts for 6 months. Every penny that wasn't going to rent or utilities or the minimum payment on a credit card that would never die, every penny went into a coffee can under her bed. 6 months of being invisible, of wiping drool and changing bedpans and eating the oatmeal that Mr. Hendricks left uneaten because he forgot that he had already eaten, of smiling when patients called her by dead wives' names, of pretending she didn't exist. 6 months had bought her $78. The drive home took 19 minutes. The apartment was cold. The landlord had shut off the heat because Mia was 2 weeks behind on rent. She had explained about Emma. He had explained about mortgage payments. The heat remained off. She pulled on her heaviest sweater and sat on the edge of the bed. The apartment was the size of a closet in a wealthy person's house. 1 room that served as bedroom and living space. A kitchen barely bigger than a bus station bathroom. A shower with water pressure like someone standing 3 feet away spitting at you. On her nightstand sat a photograph in a plastic frame. Emma at age 3, gapped and grinning, wearing a dress that Mia had sewn from discount fabric. Emma at age 5, standing in front of Mia's car before the transmission died. Emma at age 7, lying in a hospital bed, bald from chemotherapy, but still smiling like she was being photographed for a magazine instead of a cancer ward. Emma, who loved the color blue because Mia told her that blue was the color of sky and freedom and going anywhere you wanted to go. Emma, who was going to die in 7 days if Mia didn't find $125,000. The rain started at 6:43 p.m. Not rain, really. It was the kind of storm that Boston threw around like a weapon, the kind of wind that could bend trees backward, the kind of wet that soaked through clothes and into bone. Mia drove because she had to. The night shift at Shady Pine started at 7. Mrs. Chen did not accept weather as an excuse. The 1997 Honda Civic made a sound like a wounded animal. Mia had heard it before. Once or twice, usually on mornings when the temperature dropped below 30. Tonight it sounded worse. The sound of something dying. Route 128 was the highway that connected the care home to everything else Boston wanted to hide. Industrial parks. Abandoned factories. Places where terrible things happened in the dark and nobody asked questions. The car made the sound again. Mia gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Come on," she whispered. "We can make it. We can make it. Please." The car did not listen to prayer. It had never listened to prayer. The engine died at 7:28 p.m. Just stopped. Like someone had pulled a plug. The car coasted to the shoulder of Route 128 as the storm hammered rain against the windows so hard it sounded like bullets. Mia sat in the sudden silence. The radio went quiet. The dashboard lights died. The car became a coffin. She tried the ignition. Nothing. She tried it again. Nothing. The storm continued its assault against the metal shell, rain and wind and cold that seemed to come from the end of the world. Her phone had 4% battery. No service. She was alone on a highway in the dark with a dead car and a storm that showed no mercy. What happened next was something no one could have predicted. Red lights appeared in the darkness. not the lights of a helpful stranger in a well-maintained vehicle. These were headlights so bright they were almost white, and they belonged to a black SUV that pulled up behind her car like a predator who had found an injured animal. Then another SUV appeared. Then another. Then a fourth. For black vehicles in the October storm. For vehicles that did not belong on Route 128 unless something very bad was about to happen. The door of the first SUV opened. And everything that had seemed impossible 5 minutes before became nothing compared to what was about to unfold. The engine made a sound like a living thing dying. A grinding, metal scream that had been growing louder for weeks, and now, on this October night on Route 128, it gave up completely. The dashboard lights flickered once. Twice. Then nothing. Darkness swallowed the interior of Mia Morales' 2003 Honda Civic like the mouth of something hungry. She gripped the steering wheel. Her knuckles were white. Her hands were shaking not from fear but from exhaustion, 19 hours awake, double shifts at Shady Pines Care Home, her muscles burning, her vision blurring at the edges. The car coasted to the shoulder as the October storm hammered against the windows so hard it sounded like bullets fired at point-blank range. Mia tried the ignition. The engine clicked weakly. Nothing. She tried again. Click. Click. Nothing. The storm continued. Wind that came from somewhere north of Mercy, carrying rain sideways across the empty highway, bending the dead leaves into shapes like grasping hands. The temperature had dropped to 34 degrees. Her breath came out in visible clouds. She wore a thin blue coat that had belonged to someone else 5 years ago, and it had never been warm enough for October in Boston. Her phone had 4% battery. She pulled it from her pocket with trembling fingers. No service. Of course. No service on Route 128 in the dark, in the storm, miles from anything that could help a woman with $78 to her name and a car that was now a coffin. She sat there. Alone. The rain pounding like fists against metal. The wind howling past like something being tortured. No other cars. No houses visible through the downpour. Just the endless stretch of black asphalt and the darkness that pressed against the windows like it had weight. What happened next began as red lights in the distance. Not the warm, reassuring red of a helpful stranger coming to jumpstart her battery. These were headlights so bright they were almost white, belonging to a black SUV that emerged from the storm like a predator drawn by the smell of blood. The vehicle pulled up behind her dead Honda and stopped. Mia's heart seized. Then another SUV appeared. And another. And a fourth. For black vehicles in the October storm, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that suggested training, military grade, absolutely nothing accidental. Their windows were tinted so dark you couldn't see inside. You couldn't see the men waiting in the darkness. Mia's instinct was to run. But her legs had gone stiff from the cold and exhaustion. Hypothermia was already setting in, shutting down her extremities, making everything feel dreamlike and slow. She watched as the door of the center SUV opened. A man stepped out into the storm. He was 6'3", with the kind of broad shoulders that seemed to carry weight beyond muscle, the weight of empire, of power, of things done and things ordered done. His coat was black cashmere worth more than 3 months of her rent. His dark hair was slicked back despite the rain. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and when they found her through the windshield of her dead car, they assessed her like a threat assessment, cold and calculating and utterly devoid of mercy. This was Alejandro Valenti. He didn't know her name yet. She didn't know his. And neither of them understood that in the next 3 minutes, their lives were going to rewrite themselves into something neither had expected. Behind him, 2 men emerged from the SUV. One tall and lean with the scar of a knife running from his ear to his chin, the other broader, moving with the careful precision of someone trained in violence. Tony and Dario. They had worked for Alejandro Valenti for years. They had never seen him look at a stranger the way he was looking at this woman in the dead car. Alejandro approached her window. She didn't roll it down. Her hands were frozen. He reached for the handle himself, and she flinched, but he simply opened the door. The wind roared in like a living thing. "You're freezing," he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. Like the kind of voice that had never been questioned, never been denied, never been told no by anyone in any language. "Get in." Mia's mouth opened. Her voice came out shattered like glass. "I just need a jump start. I can call someone. I have a phone. I just need—" "Your phone is dead," he said. Not a question. A statement of fact. He had already assessed her entire situation the way a general surveys a battlefield. Broken car. Dead phone. No jacket suitable for this temperature. Lips already beginning to show the blue tinge of hypothermia. You have maybe 20 minutes before it gets dangerous. Get in the car. I don't. Who are you? Someone who doesn't ask twice. The words came out like a blade. His eyes didn't blink. Get in. Something in his tone made her body obey even though her mind was screaming warnings. She pulled herself out of the dead Honda on legs that barely held her weight. The rain immediately soaked through her thin coat. The wind cut right through to her skin. She climbed into the back of the SUV, and the door closed behind her like the lock of a vault. The heat inside was overwhelming. Leather seats that cost more than her annual salary. Climate control set to 72 degrees. The warmth wrapped around her like something alive, and her body began to shake uncontrollably as the hypothermia reversed itself. Alejandro sat across from her. Not beside her. Across from her, maintaining distance, his hand pressed against his side. She didn't see the blood yet. He was wearing a white shirt beneath the cashmere coat, and the white was hiding red the way ocean hides what sinks beneath the surface. "Where do you live?" he asked. She heard her own voice as if from very far away. "How did you—" "I never said." "You're heading north on Route 128 at 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday in a car that's barely held together. That tells me everything." He was already on his phone, speaking rapid Italian into the mouthpiece. The words meant nothing to her, but the tone meant everything. Authority. Command. The kind of power that moved people without raising its voice. He ended the call. "We're not going to your address. You need medical attention, and you need it now." The SUV moved. Dario driving. Tony in the passenger seat, watching her in the rearview mirror with an expression she couldn't read. Mia realized too late that she was in a car with strangers, in a storm, with no one knowing where she was. This was the moment she should have been afraid. But her body was so warm for the first time in months, and her eyes were so heavy, and she hadn't slept properly since Sunday. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she was being carried through a hallway. The marble floor was so polished it reflected light like water. Chandeliers hung overhead like crystal waterfalls, casting light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. She caught glimpses of men in black suits standing against walls, their hands never far from the weapons hidden beneath their jackets. Armed guards. This wasn't a hospital. This was something else entirely. Where she tried to speak, but her voice wouldn't work. "Don't try to move," a woman's voice said. Dr. Chen. She was in her 60s, with steel-gray hair and the kind of competence that came from decades of knowing how to keep powerful people alive. "You're severely hypothermic. You need rest." They laid her on a bed in a guest room that was larger than her entire apartment. Silk sheets. Pillows that felt like clouds. And 4 needles sliding into the vein of her left arm, tubes running to a bag of clear fluid. Warm blankets piled on top of her. She heard fragments of conversation from somewhere beyond the half-closed door. Voices speaking in low, urgent tones. "Boss, she's O-negative." "How rare?" "Very. Less than 1% of the population. And the markers suggest." "Say it." "They're a match. She's a perfect match for you. After the assassination attempt yesterday, you're still bleeding internally. Without a transfusion, the infection will." The voices faded. Mia drifted into a sleep so deep it felt like drowning. She woke at 1:15 a.m. Alone. Her wet clothes had been cleaned and carefully folded on a chair. She was wearing silk pajamas she didn't remember putting on. Her wrists no longer had the blue tinge. Her fingers could move again. The room was warm. Outside the window, Boston's skyline glittered like fallen stars 40 feet below. The door was locked from the outside. She was a guest. Or she was a prisoner. The distinction had become very unclear. The morning sun cut through the floor-to-ceiling windows like a blade through silk, and Mia Morales woke to a room that didn't belong to her. Crystal fixtures caught the light and scattered it across marble surfaces. A breakfast tray sat on the nightstand, fresh fruit, warm croissants, eggs Benedict, orange juice in a glass so fine it looked like it might shatter if she breathed too hard. More food than she'd seen in weeks. Her stomach growled so violently it hurt. She ate like she was starving because she was. A knock at the door came at 9:17 in the morning. Tony entered without waiting for permission. His suit probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. His expression was blank, professional, the kind of blank that meant important things were about to happen. "Boss wants to see you. Now." Mia followed him through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Marble floors so polished she could see her reflection moving beneath her feet. Oil paintings hung on walls, portraits of severe men in even more severe suits, paintings worth more than her yearly salary. Security cameras watched from every corner. Armed guards in black jackets nodded at Tony with military precision as they passed. The office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston. Alejandro Valenti stood silhouetted against the skyline, one hand pressed to his ribs where the bandage was visible beneath his white shirt. His dark eyes moved to her the moment she entered. "Sit," he said. Mia sat in the leather chair across from his desk. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Alejandro studied her for a long moment, the kind of moment where the world felt like it was holding its breath. "You saved my life. I pay my debts. What do you need?" The words came out broken. "Why would you help me? I'm nobody. You gave blood to a stranger in the middle of the night. That's not nobody." Mia's throat closed. She told him everything then: Emma's leukemia, the experimental treatment at Children's Hospital, the $125,000 needed by October 26, the 7 days that had now become 6. The double shifts at Shady Pines Care Home where she cleaned other people's bodily waste for $8 an hour. The $78 in her pocket against an impossible mountain of need. Her voice broke when she whispered the number. $125,000. I need $125,000 in 6 days or my niece dies. Alejandro listened without interrupting. His fingers moved to a phone on his desk. He made one call, his voice steady as a surgeon's hand. "Chen. Transfer $125,000 to Children's Hospital, leukemia treatment for Emma Morales, patient ID." He paused. "What's the ID?" Mia stammered the numbers through tears. He repeated them. Hung up. "Done. The hospital will confirm payment within the hour." Mia couldn't breathe. Her chest felt like something was crushing it from the inside. She whispered words that wouldn't form properly. I can't pay you back. Ever. That's. You already paid. With your blood. We're even." But his eyes said they weren't even. His eyes said she'd just become something far more complicated than a debt. Tony, standing by the door, muttered something to Dario in the hallway. Words Mia wasn't meant to hear but did anyway. In 15 years, I've never seen him do something like this. Mia started crying. Not delicate tears but ugly sobbing, 8 years of exhaustion and terror breaking open like a dam. Alejandro looked uncomfortable, the way men with power often do around human suffering. Then he did something that made Tony's jaw tighten. He handed her a handkerchief. Fine linen. Initials embroidered in the corner in thread so delicate it looked like spiderwebs. She wiped her face with something that had probably cost more than everything she owned. By 2:34 that same afternoon, reality had shifted but not broken. Mia was in the mansion's library, surrounded by books with leather spines, trying to process that her niece would live. That Emma wouldn't die in a hospital bed before her 7th birthday. That she could breathe now. Could think. Could be. Tony brought her a phone. Someone's been calling Shady Pines asking for you. Mia's blood turned to ice water in her veins. She knew who. Mrs. Chen, the director at Shady Pines, spoke in a voice tight with worry. Mia, that man came by again. Douglas. He was yelling in the lobby, said you owe him money, said you stole from him. I had to call security. She paused. He seemed violent. The phone felt heavy as a stone in Mia's hand. Her breathing came in short, sharp gasps. Tony watched her face change, watched the color drain from it like someone had pulled a plug. He took the phone. Listened. His expression darkened. By 3:11 in the afternoon, Mia was telling Alindro Valenti things she'd never told anyone. She started with her shirt. Lifted it. Turned around. The silence that followed was the worst kind of silence, the kind where you could hear a heartbeat from across a room. Her back was a map of hell. Scars from a belt buckle that had belonged to Douglas Hale. Scars from being shoved through a glass table. Scars from 8 years of hidden violence, from a hand raised again and again while she learned to be very, very still. The purple marks were fresher, from last week when she ran and he caught her outside the grocery store and twisted her wrist until something inside it screamed. He's been hunting me for 4 months, she whispered. Since I left him. He shows up at work, at the apartment, he follows me to Emma's school. I filed reports but his cousin is a detective and he buries them. The 5th one vanished. I can't go to the police because they won't help and I can't leave Boston because Emma needs me and I just keep running and he keeps finding me. Alindro's voice was very quiet. Not anymore. But what happened next was something no one could predict, something that spiraled outward like poison through water. At 5:47 that same evening, in a penthouse ballroom at the Four Seasons, Diana Whitfield stood in a circle of Boston's elite. Old money. New money. All of them sharks. Diana was 43, immaculate, the kind of beautiful that came from inherited wealth and a personal trainer who cost what teachers made in a year. Her hand rested on Douglas Hale's arm. They'd started dating 2 weeks ago, and she liked the way he looked at her, hungry, obsessive, like she mattered more than anything else in the world. It was intoxicating. That poor maid from Shady Pines, she said to the circle, her voice soaked in fake sympathy. Mia something. I heard she's been stealing from patients. Douglas tried to help her, dated her for years, but she's unstable. Violent, even. She threw a glass at him. I've told everyone to avoid her if she applies anywhere. Diana laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a graveyard. You never know what people are capable of until you really know them. The rumors spread like a virus. By 8 o'clock that night, Mia's name was mud in circles she didn't even know existed. 3 hospitals where she'd submitted applications for better-paying jobs sent rejection letters with no explanation. A staffing agency that had offered her weekend work suddenly became unavailable. Boston's wealthy closed their doors. Simultaneously. Perfectly. At 9:23, Douglas Hale sat in his apartment in Dorchester, scrolling through photos of Mia on his phone. Photos he'd taken without permission. His cousin Marcus sat across from him, a Boston police detective whose badge had become a tool for burying inconvenient truths. I told you, the reports keep getting filed, Marcus said, exhaling through his nose. Eventually someone's going to notice I'm destroying evidence. Douglas's hand tightened around his beer bottle. His eyes had that look, that dangerous look, like a predator that had tasted blood and couldn't think of anything else. Make her stop filing them. She's mine. She doesn't get to leave. You need to let this go, Doug. I'm going to find her. And when I do, his voice dropped to something barely audible. When I do, she's going to remember exactly who she belongs to. He didn't know that across the city, in a mansion with marble floors and men in suits standing against walls, Alejandro Valenti was making a phone call that would rewrite both their futures. "Find everything," he said into the phone, his voice steady as a blade. "Everything on Douglas Hale and Diana Whitfield. Every crime, every secret, every lie. I want it by morning." The man on the other end didn't ask questions. In this world, you didn't ask Alejandro Valenti why. You just obeyed. Mia stood at the window of her guest room, watching the city lights flicker on as darkness swallowed the sky. She thought of Emma at the hospital, the doctor telling her that the treatment would start tomorrow. She thought of Emma's small hand in hers, Emma asking with the unguarded hope of a child, "Will it hurt?" And Mia had promised her no. Not much. Not for long. "You're strong, baby. You're so strong." She didn't know that in the hours approaching midnight, a man was gathering information about her abuser like weapons. She didn't know that fate was about to move very, very fast. She didn't know that the storm wasn't over yet. But it was coming to an end. The lightning was about to strike. At 4:17 in the morning, Alejandro Valenti sat in his office on the 42nd floor of a building that bore his family's name, watching the city sleep below him. The lights of Boston spread out like scattered diamonds against black velvet, indifferent to the violence that was about to unfold. His phone sat on mahogany darker than blood. He had made the call. 12 seconds of instructions. That was all it took to set a man's world on fire. In her guest room at the mansion, Mia Morales lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She had not slept since finding the photograph. Douglas had taken it through the window of Emma's hospital room. Emma's small face visible on the pillow, bandaged where the port had been installed for chemotherapy. The message beneath it had been 4 words. "She's so pretty." Her hand shook as she held her old phone. 43 messages in 6 hours. Each one a blade wrapped in ice. "I know where she is. You think a gangster protects anyone? You're mine, Mia." The final text sat at the bottom of the thread like a threat written in blood. "If I can't have you, no one will." She had shown Tony. Tony had shown Alejandro. Alejandro's response had been immediate and absolute. "Get 8 men to Children's Hospital. Now. No one gets near that room." But protection was not enough. Mia understood that now, sitting in silk pajamas that cost more than her monthly rent used to be, in a mansion that made her feel smaller instead of safer. Protection was a wall. But walls could be breached. 3 blocks away, in a high-rise in Boston's financial district, Diana Whitfield stood before a mahogany table where 12 board members of the Whitfield Foundation sat like judges. The time was 1:11 in the morning. She had called the emergency meeting hours before, claiming a crisis of trust. Her voice was steady as she laid out her documents, fabricated receipts, forged signatures, emails that never existed. "Mia Morales," she said, her voice dripping with the false concern of a predator, "has been embezzling from Shady Pines Care Home for 2 years. Over $40,000. The Foundation's reputation is at risk if we continue our partnership with any facility that employs her." One of the board members, a woman named Catherine, frowned. "Diana, I've never heard of any embezzlement investigation at Shady Pines. Where is this coming from?" "My investigators uncovered it," Diana said smoothly. "I have a responsibility to this foundation's integrity." She had rehearsed this moment in the mirror of her Beacon Hill mansion, practicing the tremor in her voice that suggested reluctant honesty instead of calculated cruelty. "I move that we immediately blacklist Mia Morales from any healthcare employment in Massachusetts pending investigation." The vote took 8 minutes. It passed 11-1. Catherine abstained, but her abstention meant nothing against the tide. By 3:15 that morning, the Foundation had filed a formal complaint with the Massachusetts Medical Board. By dawn, Mia's healthcare license would be under suspension pending investigation. The fabricated charges would take weeks to disprove. Diana knew this. She was counting on it. What she did not know was that Alejandro Valenti's investigators had already found her accountant. They had already offered him immunity from prosecution in exchange for testimony. They had already compiled evidence of 3 other women Diana had destroyed using identical schemes, their careers erased, their reputations shattered, their names now dust in the wake of Diana's ambition. What Diana did not know was that at 1:53 in the morning, while she stood in that boardroom, federal agents were preparing warrants. The kitchen in the mansion was all white marble and stainless steel, a space designed to intimidate through its emptiness. At 3:52 in the morning, Mia Morales stood alone in that kitchen, her bare feet cold against the floor. She could not sleep. Sleep felt like a luxury reserved for people who were not drowning. On the counter sat an object that had made her stop breathing when she first saw it. Her grandmother's recipe book. Leather-bound, pages yellow with age, edges worn soft from 100 years of handling. The book she had left in her car 3 days ago. The book Alejandro's men must have retrieved from the wreckage. She opened it slowly, afraid to touch something so fragile. Her grandmother's handwriting filled the margins in dark blue ink, words pressed so firmly into the paper they raised small mountains of lead. Add more sugar for difficult days. This recipe fixes heartbreak. When you are lost, cook something your mother taught you. Mia turned the pages with trembling fingers. Every recipe was paired with a note. Every note felt like her grandmother was speaking across the years, offering wisdom to a granddaughter she would never meet. On page 47, tucked between instructions for bread that would not rise and instructions for soup that never spoiled, a single line was underlined 3 times. The storm will pass and you are far stronger than you think. Mia's breath came in shallow gasps. She tried to hold the pages steady. The recipe book fell from her hands. Pages scattered across the white marble like snow. She slid down the cabinet to the floor, her back against the cold, her hands shaking so hard she could barely see them. In that moment, she understood what she had done. She had brought a man like Alejandro into her life. She had given him her blood, and now she had given him Douglas, Diana, all of it, all of her pain tangled up in his world. He would destroy them. She knew he would destroy them. And that destruction would follow her forever like a shadow that refused to leave. She thought about running. Disappearing to another state, cutting her hair, changing her name, leaving everyone behind so that Douglas could not use them as leverage. Emma could stay with the doctors. Emma could recover without her. The thought made her stomach tear open. She pressed her forehead to the cold marble and began to cry in a way she had not cried since the night Douglas broke her ribs. That was when Alejandro found her. He entered the kitchen wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, looking like something human instead of something carved from marble and rage. He had been awake too. He watched her for a moment in silence, then sat on the floor beside her. Not close. Not touching. Just there. Present. Like a man soothing a frightened animal. The quiet stretched between them, thick enough to drown in. I was betrayed by my brother, he said finally. His voice was different in the darkness, softer somehow, carrying weight that had nothing to do with power. Luca. 3 years ago. He sold our family's roots to the Constantine organization for $2 million and a promise of protection. 40 of our men died in the ambush that followed. 40 men with families, with children, with names and histories. I had to choose between mercy and survival. Mia's breathing began to slow. She looked at him but said nothing. I chose survival, he continued. Luca is in a federal prison in Arizona right now, protective custody. He lives every single day knowing that if he walked free, I would do things to him that make normal death look merciful. That is not mercy. That is justice with interest. Alejandro turned his head to look at her. Why am I telling you this? Because betrayal taught me to recognize loyalty when it walks through my door. You gave blood to a stranger. You did not ask for anything in return. That is rare. And I do not let rare things get destroyed by men like Douglas Hale. Mia's hand found the scattered pages of the recipe book. One page lay face up, showing her grandmother's underlined sentence. She picked it up. Held it. "The storm will pass," she whispered. "The storm will end tonight," Alejandro said. He stood, extended his hand. She took it. At 5:34 in the morning on October 23, the FBI broke down Douglas Hale's apartment door on Dudley Street in Dorchester. The battering ram struck at the frame. The door collapsed inward. 12 federal agents in full tactical gear moved through the space like a rehearsed violence. Douglas was asleep in his bed when they reached him. He had been drinking. He smelled like stale beer and something chemical, something that made his breath sharp as rust. "Douglas Hale, you are under arrest for assault, witness intimidation, embezzlement, and stalking," the agent said. Her name was Morrison. She had been building this case for 6 months, hamstrung by evidence that would not materialize, witnesses too terrified to talk. Then, at 11 p.m. the night before, she had received an encrypted message containing everything. Bank records showing Douglas stealing from his employer. Security footage from every angle. Victim testimony. The whole architecture of his violence handed to her completely intact. Douglas tried to run. He made it 3 steps. An agent named Chen took him down. The impact of his body hitting the ground made a sound like meat hitting marble. He was screaming before his hands were cuffed. "You can't do this. My cousin is a detective. Detective Marcus Hale." But Detective Marcus Hale was already being arrested at his own home 2 miles away, his career ending in handcuffs for evidence tampering, for corruption, for 6 years of protecting his cousin's violence. Douglas was dragged from his apartment building at 6:02 in the morning. The morning news had been tipped off by someone. Camera crews were waiting. The footage would play on every channel in Boston. Douglas Hale in handcuffs, eyes wild, mouth open, screaming threats that made him look exactly like the predator he was. His face became synonymous with violence. With danger. With a man who belonged in a cage. Meanwhile, across the city in her Beacon Hill mansion, Diana Whitfield was asleep. She would sleep for 3 more hours. She would wake to her phone ringing. By 9:19 in the morning, the Massachusetts Attorney General's office would announce an investigation into her foundation for fraud, defamation, and conspiracy. By 10:15, her own accountant would be testifying to federal investigators, his immunity agreement already signed. By 11 a.m., her accounts would be frozen. By noon, news cameras would be outside her mansion. By 1 p.m., she would be escorted from her home by federal agents, her face bright red, her voice breaking as she screamed at the reporters who had once called her Boston's most generous philanthropist. The sentencing came through at 1:15 that afternoon. Douglas Hale, with his prior record and new charges combined, facing 40 years in federal prison. No parole eligibility for 25. The judge's statement was clinical and absolute: this defendant represents a clear and ongoing danger to his victims. The court finds no circumstance that justifies leniency. 40 years. A sentence that began and ended his life in a single breath. In the mansion, Alejandro watched the news coverage from his office. Tony and Dario stood flanking him, their faces unreadable. On the screen, Douglas was being led into the federal courthouse, his frame trembling, his head down, looking like a man who had finally understood that the consequences of his cruelty were not theoretical. They were stone. They were time. They were the rest of his life measured in prison cells. "Too quick," Tony said quietly. "Too easy. Too merciful." Alejandro's smile was cold as a winter wind. 40 years in a cage, knowing the woman he tried to break is free and walking in sunlight while he dies behind bars. That is not mercy. That is justice with interest. He turned off the television. The screen went black. "Tell me about the hospitals. Tell me about the protection at Children's." 8 men, Dario said. "Around the clock. The girl sleeps safely. The mother can breathe now." Alejandro nodded. He thought of Mia, standing in his kitchen at 4 a.m., holding a page from her grandmother's recipe book. he thought of her saying those words. The storm will pass. He had made sure of it. The storm was over. Now came the part he had never learned to do. The part about building something after the destruction. The part about being the kind of man who could sit next to a broken woman and promise her that the world would not take her again. The mansion kitchen at 4:22 in the morning is a cathedral of silence. Mia Morales sits at the marble counter, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that has gone cold an hour ago, and in front of her lies a sheet of expensive stationery that costs more than she used to spend on groceries in a week. The pen trembles between her fingers like a blade wrapped in ice. Outside, Boston sleeps. Inside, her heart is breaking in real time. She has written the first line 17 times. Crossed it out 17 times. The 18th attempt sits before her now, ink still wet, the words arranged like a confession she has no right to make. Alejandro, you saved my life twice. Once from the storm. Once from myself. But she cannot finish it. The recipe book sits open beside her, her grandmother's faded handwriting visible in the margins. The storm will pass and you are far stronger than you think. The words have sustained her through 8 years of Douglas Hale's fists. Through nights when she counted dollars and came up short. Through the moment she stood in a medical laboratory and learned that Emma, her niece, age 7, had leukemia, and the treatment cost $125,000, a number so impossibly large it might as well have been written in a foreign language. She had $78. The storm did not pass on its own. It crashed into her on Route 128 during a freezing October night when her car, a 2003 Honda Civic with 3 working windows and brakes that screamed like an animal, finally gave up its ghost. The engine died. The heater died. The world contracted into a single certainty: she would freeze in that car, and Emma would die in that hospital, and no one in this city would remember either of their names. Then the black SUVs appeared. 15 of them, moving through the darkness like sharks cutting through black water. They emerged from the storm like a convoy summoned by fate or something darker than fate. The window of the lead vehicle rolled down, and a man looked out at her, a man with eyes the color of a winter storm and a scar running from his left temple to his jawline like a map of survival. He was tall, muscular, wearing a cashmere coat that cost more than her annual rent. His name was Alejandro Valenti. He was the most dangerous person in Boston. He was also, in that moment, her only chance. She did not know that. Not yet. What she knew was that a man wrapped in expensive darkness was telling his men to bring her inside the vehicle, and she was too cold to refuse, and Emma was waiting for a miracle, and miracles wear many faces. The blood transfusion changed everything. Mia's blood type was rare, a genetic lottery she had won without knowing she was playing. When Alejandro's private doctors ran the tests, their faces shifted. One of them whispered to another, this woman and no other. She was a match for the transfusion he needed after an assassination attempt left him bleeding into his own lungs. She could save him. A maid who made $8 an hour could save the crime boss of Boston. The irony arrived like a slap across the face. She gave the blood. 1 pint of her life poured into a machine that filtered it, refined it, pumped it back into the body of a man who had ordered people into graves. And in doing so, she became his. Not by choice. By biology. By the mercy of a human body that did not distinguish between saint and sinner, that only knew, this man is bleeding, and only this woman can stop it. Now, 6 months later, in this kitchen at 4:22 in the morning when both of them wake from nightmares they do not discuss, she is writing a goodbye letter. The coffee is cold. The letter is incomplete. Outside, the April wind touches the mansion windows with a sound like fingernails on glass. Inside, Mia writes, I know what people say about you. What you've done. What you are. But I also know you gave a stranger mercy when you could have left her on that highway. You gave my niece her life when you could have demanded anything. I'm writing this because I have to leave before I become a liability you can't afford. She stops. Closes her eyes. The words feel like betrayal. What she does not write is the truth. I'm leaving because I am falling in love with you, and that makes me dangerous. People will use me to get to you. I won't let that happen. I'll disappear before dawn. I'll take the money you gave me and I'll vanish into a city where no one knows my name. Emma is safe now. Her treatment is working. She'll be in remission within months. You've given her that. You've given her life. I can't let you pay for my heart on top of everything else. Mia folds the letter. Her fingers are steady now, a small cruelty of the body. The hands know how to be calm even when the soul is fracturing. She places the folded paper on his desk in the office one hallway away. She does not look at it once she has set it down. If she looks at it, she will burn it. If she burns it, she will stay. If she stays, she will destroy everything they have managed to build together in these impossible 6 months. A sound stops her. Not a loud sound. A small one. The creak of a floorboard behind her. Alejandro stands in the doorway wearing grey sweatpants and a t-shirt, his muscular frame silhouetted against the hallway light. His eyes move from her face to the letter on his desk. The scar on his face catches the shadows. He has not shaved. He looks exactly like what he is, a man who has not slept, a man who has been waiting. Going somewhere. His voice is quiet. Dangerous. Like a blade cutting through air. Mia's breath catches. Her body betrays her with the truth before her mouth can construct a lie. Her heart is audible. Her hands shake. She is standing in the office of the most powerful man in Boston, caught in the act of leaving him, and she cannot think of a single word that will not destroy them both. She starts, but Alejandro is already moving. He crosses the distance between them in 3 strides, picks up the letter, unfolds it with care, reads it while she stands frozen like a statue in a museum of her own failure. The silence stretches for an eternity. When he finishes reading, he sets the letter down on the desk with the same careful deliberation he uses for everything, a man who has learned that violence comes from carelessness, so he is careful with everything now, even paper. You think you are a liability. His eyes lock onto hers. I know I am. Mia's voice is barely a whisper. People will come after you through me. It's better if I... 8 years. Alejandro cuts her off, his words arriving like stones into still water. You survived 8 years of hell from a man who should have protected you. You worked yourself to exhaustion for a niece who is not even your daughter. You gave blood to a stranger who had every reason to terrify you. And you think leaving protects me? He steps closer. You don't protect me by running. You insult me by assuming I cannot protect you. Mia's eyes fill with tears. The tears come suddenly, without permission, the way all true things do. Why? Why would you want to? I'm nobody special. I'm just... Alejandro's hand catches her chin, gentle but firm, forcing her to meet his eyes. His touch is careful, always aware of what hands have done to her before. Betrayal taught me to recognize loyalty when it walks through my door. You walked through my door. And I do not let go of rare things. The grandmother's recipe book sits on the kitchen counter 3 rooms away. The margins are filled with fading handwriting. The storm will pass and you are far stronger than you think. Your grandmother wrote that the storm passes. Alejandro's voice softens almost imperceptibly. The storm has passed. Douglas is in a cell. Diana is finished. Emma is being treated. You are free. Mia's voice breaks. Free to what? My license is under investigation. I cannot work in healthcare. I have no money, no. The investigation was dropped 2 hours ago. Alejandro's words fall like a gavel. Diana's accountant confessed to fabricating everything. Your record is cleared. And you have $50,000 transferred to your account for pain and suffering damages. My lawyers are handling it. Mia cannot process this. Cannot understand why he is doing this. The question burns in her chest before she can stop it. What do you want from me? Alejandro's expression shifts, become something vulnerable that she has never seen on his face before. Something almost human. I want you to stay. Not as a debt. Not as an obligation. Stay because you choose to. Help me remember what mercy looks like. Teach me how someone like you exists in a world like mine. It is not a declaration of love. It is something more fragile, an admission that he needs what she has, that 8 years of violence did not break her capacity for kindness, and that terrifies and fascinates him in equal measure. Mia looks at the letter on his desk. At the man who found her in a storm and changed everything. She thinks of Emma, safe in a hospital bed. Of Douglas Hale, rotting in federal prison for 40 years. Of Douglas's cousin Marcus, disbarred and sentenced to 8 years for corruption. Of Diana Whitfield, her assets liquidated, her social standing demolished, her pride shattered in the most public way possible. The storm has passed. She whispers, I do not know how to do this. How to be in your world. Alindro's rare, small smile appears like a sunrise. Neither do I. But we will figure it out. The goodbye letter remains on his desk, unfinished business transformed into a beginning. 6 months later, April arrives with soft light and the sound of Emma's laughter filling the mansion garden. The little girl, age 7, pushes herself higher on the swing set that Alindro had installed, her hair growing back in soft curls, her future no longer theoretical but certain. The experimental treatment worked. She is healthy. She is alive. Mia works at the mansion now, not as staff but as something undefined, the woman who lives in the East Wing, who manages Alindro's legitimate business foundations, who sits beside him at dinners with his men and somehow makes them laugh. She wears sleeveless dresses now without shame. The scars on her back have faded into memory. In the kitchen at 4:22 in the morning, Mia makes her grandmother's bread while Alindro watches, still amazed that she is real, that she stayed, that loyalty exists in human form. She asks, do you ever regret it? Finding me that night. He pulls her close, his hands gentle on her waist, always careful, always aware. I regret that you needed to be found. But I do not regret finding you. He pauses. The kitchen fills with the smell of rising dough. You changed something in me. Made me remember that mercy is not weakness. Sometimes the people we save end up saving us in return. Strength is not about surviving alone. It is about recognizing when someone's loyalty is worth protecting, when mercy is worth the risk, when the storm passes and reveals someone worth standing beside in the aftermath. If this story moved you, drop a like and subscribe because tomorrow we have another story that will change how you see second chances. Comment below, have you ever helped a stranger and had it change your life? I read every single comment. Your story matters. And remember what Mia's grandmother wrote, the storm will pass and you are far stronger than you think. That is not just a closing line. That is a promise. See you tomorrow.